Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bros podcast. My name is Jeremy. Welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show today. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Ilan. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm well, mate. And we're also joined by an epic guest today, Caspar Tremlett. How you going, mate?
Going well, boys. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, pleasure to have you on. We're excited to dive into all things fashion related, young entrepreneurship related, all the twists and turns that you've learnt about, dealt with in your young, successful career and beyond so far. So we're keen to dive in and get stuck into it, mate.
Cool. Bit of a wrap. No, keen to get into it.
So I've got a question, and I think this is going to become a theme anytime we've got some form of fashion expert on. And the question is...
Definitely not a fashion expert as well.
Oh, well, are skinny jeans out? Or are they going to make a return?
I listened to the other pod with Jesse, and I know he agreed with me that they're definitely a bit out, but trends just come and go. So I reckon they will come around again. Who knows, 5-10 years could be the next thing. I think it all just goes in a cycle.
It cycles. Like, I was actually talking to someone the other day, actually just a patient of mine, and he was like, he's 80 years old. His whole career was in like menswear fashion, like worked in menswear fashion for like 50 years. And we were talking about fashion and trends, and he said like everything just recycles like year on year. And I think it'll be the same with skinny jeans eventually. I think they're definitely burdened and they're like terminal death right now. But
That's
like, but who knows? 20 years time or so, I reckon there might be a spike up again.
I think so as well. Like 5 years ago, if you told me I was going to wear parachute pants and shorts, I'd say, yeah, you're joking, basically.
No,
but yeah, it might come around.
When did it actually become trendy to wear baggy jeans and baggy pants?
I guess it slowly develops, same as anything. Like you don't go ultra baggy parachute pants straight after skinny jeans. Like, but I don't know, in the last, I think probably in the last few years specifically.
Yeah.
So I look at photos of us when we were in school. Probably it would have been like 2016 still. Skinny jeans were the go.
Oh mate, I had spray-ons then. Like I was like, they were like skin tight to my nuts back then. Pretty much, yeah. But like we said, you got to slowly graduate. And Ilan, I think you're slowly graduating. You're now at like the slim fitting jeans, I would say.
You reckon?
Yeah, slim fitting.
I wouldn't say these are slim, but
yeah,
we'll take it.
Anyways, let's dive into the episode properly now. And Casper, want to kick off with just give our listeners and the lovely people interested in fashion and all things you a brief synopsis about yourself, mate.
Brief.
We're not too brief here.
No. In terms of coming straight out of school, I guess that's a good place to start it off. Was doing just job to job, waitering and stuff like that, unpacking shipping containers, whatever I could do to get money. My uni was heavily affected with COVID, of course. I think for the first 2 years of my degree, I was on campus 4 times or something ridiculous like that. So a bit of that uni life and developing relationships and bonds, I got it severely affected with that. So kind of interrupted uni life. And then during uni was when the idea of potentially starting a brand and a business being Mertra came about, which was exciting. And then that was kind of the main focus point for the last few years.
Amazing. And we obviously see a big spike in people creating clothing brands nowadays. I feel like, back then it was... everyone's doing it now. But, back then, even though it was only a couple years ago, around like 2020, 2021, probably like relatively new and fresh back then. Like it wasn't to the extent that everyone's doing it now. So what were, I guess, your inspirations at the time then? And why did you want to go down that pathway?
I think in terms of fashion, during school, I never had a job because I was reselling sneakers. And I was like,
that's how you start, hey?
Yeah, I was a bit of a sneakerhead. I absolutely love sneakers, like staying up till midnight, making sure that I was going to cop
sleeping
the
out
best,
of Chadston.
Yeah, bestseller. I had a couple mates I used to pay to go to Chadston for me.
Oh, no way.
Wait, there's a whole laundering list of people doing that.
Yeah, I had a few people that I'd offer them money pretty much an hourly to buy a certain amount of sneakers for me.
Outside sneaker boy.
Yeah, so never really had a job in school, and I was just flipping and reselling sneakers. So that was essentially my first job. And then my love for fashion kind of developed through vintage thrift shopping. And then I think just it's the automatic progression from sneakerhead to starting to like everything else you're wearing, and that being kind of a creative outlet for yourself. And then, yeah, loved a few graphic designers and thought potentially could put that on a piece of clothing and to sell. And that was kind of the idea, basically.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
Hey? And I guess, would you say started pretty small, just like anything? And how did you, I guess, start with the initial promotions, lifting off your brand, getting the word out there? Like, I'm sure there were also plenty of doubters and people thinking, you know, what the hell are you doing, mate? Etc. etc.
I think that's a funny one because, as you were saying, it's kind of a bit saturated now, but I think everything's kind of saturated at this point.
Just like this, mate. Just like podcasting.
I think everything's saturated, but that's also because people have such accessibility to promote themselves through social media. So who's to say, like, there was so many people starting brands, but you just might have not seen them because you don't see them on your For You page, for example, or those people trying to tell their stories. So that's a bit of an interesting one. I think the start of Mertra was just like grind it out. You kind of just figure it out. Make a mistake, lean on people surrounding you, and that's kind of how you learn and get going. And at the beginning, obviously, it was a lot of friends and family support.
Amazing.
The first couple drops, which was very fortunate, but then it slowly progressed and developed, and we were lucky enough to get the public, I guess, on board to a degree and started selling to not our friends and family.
Mad.
Yeah.
Obviously, you would have started it as a business, but at any point, did you feel like you were treating it almost like a hobby at the start? And then when it started taking off a little bit, you're like, wow, this can genuinely turn into some form of career if I know how to manage it right.
I think it's an interesting one because at the start, and I think one of the reasons why we think fashion brands and stuff is so saturated now is because people think it's a bit of a quick money grab. Do you know what I mean? You shouldn't get into starting a business at all, but especially fashion, if you're not thinking long term. Like, you shouldn't. It's a grind, and there's so many mistakes you have to learn to even get to a point where you might sell one garment. So it was something that we were doing as a hobby and a passion, and it was something new, exciting, and it was like a creative outlet. But definitely we wanted it to be a business, and that was the core goal. At some point, you have to almost work as if it's your full-time job before it can even become close to that being a possibility. So that's how we looked at it.
With all of those, I guess, you know, the mistakes you mentioned that you make along the way, especially at the start, are those things like, you know, sampling clothes, designs, and, you know, finding the best fit, best supplies, things like that, the ones that, you know, those core things at least are the ones that come to mind that I'm thinking of? Because, you know, so many times I know in the past that, like, I've bought from a brand that I've seen online, looks sick on Instagram, love the messaging, love the logo. I've gone and copped the hoodie, and it's as thin as tissue paper, and like it's like 2-ply type cotton, and I'm like, what have I done?
Wrapping paper.
Yeah. So is that like an example of just like brands that might just want to make a quick buck, and if you really want to go that extra distance, you really got to like get into deeper type of sampling and really try nut yourself into that and get the best quality stuff? Is that like kind of what you encountered?
Definitely. I mean, for us specifically, as you were saying, it wasn't as saturated, and there probably wasn't as many resources and kind of outlets that you could lean on, whether that's online through TikTok creators and stuff. So we had no idea of what we were doing at all. We had a few people we were lucky enough to kind of seek advice from in the industry through friends and family and stuff, and even us reaching out to people on DM just to get any advice as possible. But definitely the trials and errors, especially with product development and finding a manufacturer and stuff like that, is going to be one of the biggest stepping stones. And I think a lot of brands they progress too fast in the sense of they might get one sample or one design idea that's really good, or they think's really good at the time, but similar to how you develop as a person, your brand's going to develop alongside you. So your first design you might not like, you might like, but then 2 months down the track, it's completely different to what you want to release.
And I guess with that, like, were there any times where you got attached to a certain design and realized the market might not like that as much, so you've had to change that and almost challenge your own attachment to that.
Or 100%. Also, I think within like that could be 2 days prior of you getting it printed at the screen printers, and it's like, we don't love this design anymore, or stuff like that. And I work with a few brands now, and it's almost like, make sure you love it and sit on it, and don't release something just for the sake of releasing something. Obviously there can come the difficulties with money and just the flow of capital and stuff, and you might have to release something. But if you have the ability, you should always release something you're proud of, basically.
Yeah, and also, I guess, not be so influenced by what other people think. I mean, cliche, but so true, because you might just turn to a mate and they might think it's just a crap design, and all of a sudden, this is a product that you've been working on for X amount of time, and now you've got all these thoughts in your head, especially when you've put so much money into it as well.
For sure. I think specifically, if you're looking to start your brand, I advise, like, you shouldn't even be thinking of dropping anything for 6 months. But like, potentially if you wanted it to be long term, because you're just going to learn so much, but your creative side might change in that time as well. So your first design you might end up hating, and just like sit down, sketch it, learn Illustrator, learn all those programs, and just like throw enough stuff at a wall and hopefully a few sticks. But I think definitely that trial and error process of business in general, and that's one part of it.
Yeah. I guess, do you reckon a lot of people who are entering the fashion scene now, they have a lot of misconceptions about it? Because you mentioned earlier that they could think it's like a quick get rich quick scheme.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you reckon are some of those like misconceptions people have?
I think with social media, you see the best side of things. So with brands, it might be your favorite brand sells out in 2 minutes. It might be an influencer saying, I earned 0 to 10K in 4 months. And at times that can be the truth. And those can be very rare cases, or they've done a lot of work behind the scenes. And then I think people see that kind of top end of things, or how, like, what's the best case scenario, and you get sold that dream and you're not sure about the processes, or you don't put the work in yourself, and then you're almost half-hearting it, whatever you're doing. So I think there's a lot of mistakes that are made based on like false promises, or like the misconceptions that it might be easy to be very successful as a fashion brand, or I might become viral and be this like influencer and stuff like that, just from what they've seen on social media.
Almost sounds familiar with the podcast, isn't it?
I guess so. It's it's that dream to, be 7 episodes in and hopefully you start blowing up, right? Which we know is not the case. And we know that just like anything, it's a matter of consistency and doing it because you love it. And like, I guess it's nice to hear that this started off for you as a hobby more than anything, because I feel like when it does start off as a passion, a hobby, an interest, a creative outlet, that's when you can get a sense that this might be a long-term type of thing. When it's more so you're going in with the mindset of, I want to start a business. What business am I going to start? I feel like that passion can really be tested when the results don't come your way quick.
Well, that's the thing. I think if you fail in those circumstances, or have a few setbacks that you weren't expecting, that's when you're going to give up, basically. Yeah. If you're thinking of it as, I want to make money quick, I want this to be super successful straight away. Whereas if it's like, I'm just working on this for the love of the brand, or this is my creative outlet, that's when I think you've got the best case.
So what was it for you guys that, again, that actually got that word out there into the public, and you actually started getting people that weren't relatives and weren't friends buying your products? Was it the power of social media? Was it a bit of word of mouth? What was it for you guys?
Just social media.
Yeah.
Social media with everything. I think all brands all brands do social media, but they don't understand like the actual importance and how cool of an opportunity we have. I was talking to one of my mentors, and he does advertisements for like Ferrari and stuff like that. And he was saying the craziest thing is you could post a video tomorrow and it'd get the same amount of eyeballs on your product as like Ferrari paying for the whole production of the advertisement, as well as putting it on TV commercials or whatever it ends up being, just by posting it. And that could be all done from your iPhone. So the amount of eyeballs you can get, as you were saying with a podcast, you can see people do 4 million views. Do you know how many people that is that actually...
Mad. It's unfathomable for me. I mean, even trying to think of like, even the most basic thing of, say you're on TikTok and you're stuck in like 300 view jail. 300 people, you get 300 people in that room, and that's still a crazy amount of people. And we often don't think of it like that because we're so fixated on the numbers game. And again, that's where the passion is really tested, when it's just being fixated on numbers.
You hear it in sport all the time that they're not results oriented. Well, they are, but they're process oriented. And I think that's something that in any pursuit, whether it be fashion or a podcast, you know, an occupation, if you can get your mindset towards process and method, then your chances of success just go up.
I think it depends. Like, so many people have that end goal and it might be different. And if, for example, you're looking at it as 300 views, you're like, damn, why am I not getting like tens of thousands or whatever? But it only takes, depends on your perspective, obviously, but like one of those people to be affected in a positive manner, based on what you're saying or whatever that product is. And it's like, you're changing like the course of their life in some degree.
Exactly.
It could be as simple as a piece of advice on this podcast. It could be as simple as like keeping them warm with a hoodie, for example. I know that's not the best example, but
That's pretty
I think
solid.
it's fucking great.
yeah, I think it's just like, if you have that outlook of you're positively affecting change, and if that's your goal, you're doing a good job, whether that's 300 views or 3 million views. It's just end up going to be seen by more people, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I think that leads me to the next segue, being like, you know, now you are a fashion advisor. You do advise people about fashion, about their brands, and how to go about things. And I think that speaks of like the altruistic generosity that you've got as a person, which is rare, unique, and fucking dope, because I feel like, especially in the fashion industry, there's so many kept secrets and so many like hidden secrets about, you know, the suppliers that you have, how to go about marketing, how to go about advertising, what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And, you know, you've actually gone against that and said, fuck that, I want to go out there and help people actually make it big, just like I did. So how is that going? What was the inspiration behind that? And what have you learned from it?
Thank you, first of all. So I guess the idea behind it was initially, well, as I was saying, we were lucky enough to get help and a bit of like amazing advice, basically, which helped us so much. And those little mistakes that we made, there could have been way bigger mistakes. Yeah. And I think I've obviously got friends in the industry or people that are looking to get started. So I was kind of helping them out anyway. And there'd be little things that I thought were pretty self-explanatory or stuff like that, little tactics. And they're like, oh, that's great. That's an amazing idea. And I'm like, oh, like, okay. Yeah.
Gives you that reassurance.
Well, yeah, not even reassurance. It was just like, okay, well, that's cool that you gained something from this conversation, basically. Yeah. So then the kind of idea of I love helping people out in general. And there is so many people that keep secrets in the industry for the right reason, because you're going against your competitors, you want to stand out, and that's just business. Like, you want to do better than the people you're like potentially selling the same products to. But yeah, so that's started out working on that behind the scenes. So initially, I now work with a bunch of influencers and a few smaller like streetwear brands, just doing mentoring. So that was behind the scenes, and now working and releasing products in the very, very near future. Which will be all things processes, finding manufacturers, potential manufacturers to use, and just like marketing and stuff like that.
Sick. So what does like a typical day in the life look like for a fashion advisor?
Day in the life.
Yeah, mate. Run us through it.
So in terms of work specifically, it's all a balancing game at the moment. I'm still figuring things out for sure, but definitely at the start, I might have a few client calls, where we go over things such as their marketing campaigns or whatever we need to discuss, doing content, so brainstorming, filming, editing a bit of that content, as well as working on the projects behind the scenes, such as some digital products, kind of just resources as well. So writing those usually in the afternoons, chuck the headies on and lock in. And that's kind of what my day would typically look like on just a normal work day.
You know, I find so fascinating about that. You told me you studied psych. Did you do any sort of...
I didn't mention that in the thing, in the work day.
Not on the work day, but
yeah.
You never studied marketing though, or did you?
No.
So you've taught yourself a new skill in itself just by trial and error throughout the last few years of your, journey with Mertra. But
Yeah, I guess so, for sure. I think that's like, if you're starting your own fashion brand, I would argue, as you were saying, like the product is definitely important. But like marketing is like, people don't focus on it enough because I think people think that everyone, to be honest, has a good product these days. It's not hard to find a brand that has a heavyweight hoodie, it's drop shoulder, oversized,
Boxy
no
fit.
drawstrings, boxy fit. Obviously that's in trend at the moment, and people know what's in trend, so they might release that thing. And you do want a good product for people to return. But if you're operating online, which 99% of clothing brands are these days, especially startups, people can't see the product in hand. They can't feel the product. It's different to trying it on in a store. So if you can't figure out a way to convince people to buy your product and then they can believe how good the quality is, you're stuffed basically. So marketing, I think, is severely underrated, and people need to be prioritizing that just as much as product development, basically.
How do you get good at marketing then? Because like for some it comes naturally. I reckon some have a very good inclination when it comes to marketing, whether it's through social media, and others might struggle with it. Like what's something that helped you at that time?
I think just YouTube.
Yeah, that's the way to learn.
Well, YouTube for sure, in terms of just concepts of marketing, and during like psych and uni, I guess there's also the mindset aspect of it, and we did like kind of psychology marketing as well, like the psychology behind marketing. But I think as well, during the start, as well as analysing brands that are doing well, it was Supreme when we were starting. How is Supreme selling out every drop? How can you convince someone to camp for 4 days outside of your store? So looking at that business model, promoting scarcity, that kind of started it off in terms of that being a case study. What are they doing well? What can we replicate within our means and within our resources? And going from there for the best brands that we liked at the time.
Do you think it's also a case of not necessarily the product? Because like you mentioned before, product could be absolutely sick, but you need the people around it. Which leads me to asking, is it the environment actually that matters more? Because you can have a sick product in a subpar environment and it won't sell. But if you get an elite environment around you, it could be gone in a second.
For sure. I think it's just how you place yourself in the industry or on social media. What's your angle, and like what angle are you trying to put out there, whether that's your brand story, even the product, how are you showcasing that on social media? You just need to have a point of difference these days. With the saturation of any business, but specifically fashion, everyone's got the same quality hoodie.
Yeah.
What's the vision behind the brand? Who started the brand? What's your authentic story? Like fails, what are your triumphs? Show that on social media, I think.
So what was yours?
For what?
What was that point of difference that you guys had in terms of the story, why people should buy your brand, in terms of how you were showcasing it? What made Mertra so unique on the scene that, people thought, I want to, camp out on those pop-up store and pop-up store locations and, find myself queuing up around the corner of places just so I can get my hands on it? Why did people want to do that for your brand?
It's a good question. I think it would depend on the person that you asked. There was a few people that I actually asked the same thing at the pop-up store, and looking back at it now, like that was the greatest experience of all time. And they did have different reasoning. Some would just like be there for support of the brand 100%. Some were looking for that specific product, that scarcity. I think the promotion of, we were able to sell out garments, and that kind of hype carried on between drops and drops. And that kind of got a bit of a name for ourselves of like, you got to get in quick, I guess, which was pretty fortunate. But we promoted it that way as well. And that drop-like model was the thing. I think as well, in particular, a lot of Melbourne brands at the time, it's very easy to do, say, a hoodie. They sell well. They'll always be like your best-selling products. But if you have a look back at it, we trialed a few different products that maybe weren't as popular at the time, or just expanding the product range potentially, as well as, I think looking back, we were pretty early on the TikTok trends and getting eyes that way as well.
What year would this have been?
2022, probably.
Yeah.
2022, 2023. TikTok was still big, but I think nailing TikTok and getting eyes, and the algorithm was a bit different.
Yeah.
And
engagement.
Engagement, but we angled ourselves in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it kind of paid off.
It's funny because you mentioned before that the whole idea of like people want to know the person behind the product, and that's not just with any fashion kind of company or whatever. You could even look at it, for example, like through Elon Musk. Like look at Elon Musk, how many followers he has versus his actual products, right? So it's like Tesla has way less followers than Elon Musk. So assuming you establish yourself and you give people an insight of the personality behind the product, I feel like they're way more inclined to then follow them.
That's one of the biggest things, to be honest, that when I'm talking to startups and stuff like that, I think this TikTok scene specifically now has changed a lot in the last couple of years because of the saturation and everything's like everyone's doing something similar, but you as a person, there's no one exactly like you, or you can identify, and if you can showcase your personality in front of camera, like I'd argue if you're starting a brand now, I would start your own personal TikTok channel before starting your own brand account, because you can showcase and post the exact same things. But if you're not showing yourself as a person, why you're doing this, what this means to you, what's the reasoning behind this product, the storyline, you're cutting yourself. Like, I think like it's a really good idea of like people want to buy from people.
Yeah.
If you're getting the impression when you're on TikTok that you love this certain creator and influencer, you're more likely to support them than just a random brand that comes up.
Yeah.
So start posting yourself, I think, is one of the biggest lessons.
Yeah, and that was something that, I mean, like Ilan and I, we weren't really doing all that much within our first year. We were, posting clips from the podcast, but we weren't like actually talking to the camera about specific things. Why? Because it was fucking scary.
That's exactly why. Yeah.
It was scary. It was uncomfortable. It was completely out of our comfort zone entirely.
Still is.
Still is. And I think you can argue the same, because we've spoken about this off air as well. And you said like it's still something, you're mastering as well. And that'll take you through to, I guess, like your next projects as well.
I think it's just with everything is getting the reps in.
Yeah.
Like I always just say, just get the reps in.
Just
get it. Just get it in. But for example, with a brand and stuff, you could post yourself without talking to the camera. But I remember when I did my first personal video and talking to the camera, the outtakes of it.
You kept it real though, mate. I saw those edits and you put in like the fucks.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to do it. But like the first couple videos, honestly, it might have been a 1 minute finalized video, and if you look at the outtakes, it was like 30 minutes of me just going like, nervous, drink of water, oh my God, I'm hot now, like what did I say that correctly? I'd say the same line like 30 times, just hoping that one would be okay.
And then you just get in your head.
Get in your head, but I think it's so foreign to you what you're trying to do, putting yourself out there, especially if you're talking about a vulnerable topic or your point of view or perspective. That's hard to talk about anyway, let alone potentially getting judged with people online. So that's another factor. So
speaking of vulnerability, being behind the brand and, the face behind the brand, obviously, post Mertra, this was your baby and essentially something that you put your whole identity into for quite a fair amount of time. When you stepped away and went on to do other things, was there a bit of like that identity shift and a bit of like, what the hell do I do now type of thing?
Definitely. I think if you're doing something every day and then you're no longer doing that thing, that bit of the purpose and just feeling a bit lost was definitely experienced. But it was great because it also made me go, okay, what's next? Like, what am I going to do next? And as simple as just trying out new things. So there was a few other things I was doing behind the scenes with work. looked to start kind of like an agency with like Facebook ads and stuff, and that was doing really well, but I kind of realized that wasn't what I loved. It wasn't what I was passionate about, although the system's great and people can make a lot of money from it and stuff. It wasn't where I didn't want to wake up every day and grind it till all hours of the day, because I think there's more than just the monetary kind of side of things.
Absolutely.
So what helped you find out what you love? Or is that still an ongoing journey?
I think I love fashion. Like, absolutely love fashion, and I absolutely love trying to help people as well. So combining those two things, it was cool. And still figuring it out though, of course. Like, I can learn a new thing every day, and you just got to consistently keep learning, and that's an ongoing process, of course.
For sure. Were you on that? Were you always, not necessarily always into fashion specifically, but always a creative person? Like, even from a young age during school, did you have like influences around you that were quite creative as well?
I guess I was a bit creative. I wasn't always like, there was people in like primary school and they're doing like Picasso drawings and stuff like that. I was definitely not like that natural artist almost. But in terms of people around me, my whole family, in particular my parents, were always in that creative industry. So I always saw it as a possibility of going down that avenue and that route. So my mum was a dancer and a choreographer for like most of her life. And then dad was started in a band, became a magician, and then was a creative director for corporate things such as BMW and whatnot. So
that's doing like everything at once.
So obviously that was over a few years, but seeing my parents being successful in their own industries and almost working together at the end as well, and having that time with them, and they not picking their own hours as such, but they've got a job and they might grind it, and then we could go away, and seeing them at home kind of gave me that possibility and belief that maybe a 9 to 5, for example, was not for me, because I grew up by that. And it's interesting talking to friends when they want to start their own business and don't know how to, and that risk factor, it's the risk. Like, starting something new is scary that you don't know. And I was lucky enough to have people by my side saying, I support you no matter what you're doing, but there's so many people that don't have that opportunity. So I was pretty lucky in that sense.
I mean, there's a risk to everything. There's the risk of the 9 to 5, but there's also a risk to, starting your own thing. But I guess with you as well, like, what were some of the values that helped keep you going as well, especially maybe at that start when there was all that uncertainty?
Yeah, you've just got to put the head down, basically. I think I have a bit of I want to achieve great things, and whatever that ends up being. So the fear of failure is a big one for me, and not living up to what I think's possible. I don't know if that's a good way to say it.
It's a
but
pretty excellent way to say it.
I feel there's so many cool things that I want to do, and whether that's experiences with friends and stuff, and even kind of getting to that opportunity, but especially in the business side of things, and now helping people and helping brands out and stuff like that. There's so many cool things that I want to achieve with these brands and for my own, I guess, personal brand and what I'm doing now. And that's something that keeps me going. Obviously, people say like, you don't do a 9 to 5, that's great, but I think you join the 24/7 club.
I think so too,
And that finding that balance and the trade-off of you always feel guilty about not doing something, which is a really difficult thing that I struggle with on like every day. But yeah, it's something you just got to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can relate to that. When you mentioned, fear of failure, fear of not reaching the potential, I think it's the fear of not reaching potential. That's the one that really sticks out to me, because I feel like you'll never necessarily fail, because if you're an active person and you're always working towards something, which you are, you can't fail. You can only win and learn, I truly believe.
Yeah, the learning, it's like every fail, well, if you deem it as a failure, like it's just an opportunity to grow.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that opportunity to grow. And I therefore think it's like more so that fear of missing out on potential. Like, you've got so much potential, and is it that 15 minutes that I'm on my phone that I have missed out on getting closer to that potential? These are the thoughts that go through our minds, and obviously a lot of the time they're irrational thoughts. But, you know, you mentioned yourself as well, you struggle with, you know, managing that 24/7 mindset, and in order to switch off so you can have some downtime to then go on and reach that potential and strive towards that. So do you have like certain time blocks in your day that you block out? Do you like need to just really stick to your non-negotiables, and if so, what are they?
I think sticking to non-negotiables to a degree is something that I do. So I've learnt now the best way I get things done and I'm the most productive is time blocking my day. So I usually allow the first 3 hours, get up early, get my exercise done, make sure that I cook myself a good brekkie, make all the health side of things is all done at the start of the day.
Eat the frog.
Eat the frog. I know we've spoken about that. Eat the frog at the straight up. So whether that's run or gym or whatever that looks like. And then time block, because I've got so many different little tasks, I guess, that we went over, creating content, but like doing these calls, the digital products. If I have a huge to-do list, which I recommend doing a to-do list, but I could just jump from one to another. And I felt like at one point I had all these projects, I was almost getting 60% done. And then I got frustrated because I'm like, I feel like I've been doing this for ages, but it's just a matter of like commit to that one thing. And if you can, and get that done to its like best potential. So doing those 2-3 hour time blocks with whatever task is how I work best. But then trying to fit in things such as like seeing your family and loved ones, having fun for yourself, whether that ends up being sport, fitness, going out, whatever that looks like for you and what you enjoy with your friends. That's a difficult thing to get everything you need to do done.
Have you ever reframed though that drive that you've got as almost like a gift?
Nah.
Deep question.
I don't know. Not a gift, because I think a gift is something that you've been born with. Obviously, there's times when like I'm doing work and you see like a festival or your mates going out and you're like, I would really love to be there right now. And at times you need to do that. But there's also at times you need to go, actually, this is way more important. If I've got work for a client or something I need to get done with uni, you've got to have that trade-off and that sacrifice. So the determination and commitment, I think it's just more of a drive thing of that fear of not
reaching that potential.
Yeah. I guess in terms of, I might have a lot more drive and motivation compared to some other people, but I wouldn't say it as a gift, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair. I mean, I asked that because a lot of people who try to become really successful at one thing, they'll struggle with that question, is not buying into hustle culture so much that it eats away at them. But at the same time, that's what enables one person to actually, you know, be the one that becomes successful relative to others, because you've got that drive, you've got the fear of failure, of not reaching your potential. And sometimes, yeah, you can look at it in a really negative way, but at the same time, you can look at that and think like, well, that keeps me going. And that's a very powerful fuel, especially on days where I don't want to get anything done.
For sure. I think it's also what you deem as important. I know a lot of people that I've met through this industry or just other industries, just through social media and kind of everything like that. And their goal for some people is that high status. I want to hit 60K months. That's all I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to do everything in my power to do that. And that's all well and good. If that's what you deem as important and that's what you value and stuff, go for it, put the head down and stuff. But I think in doing that, you're forgiving something else, and that might be your fitness for someone, that might be developing that personal relationship or going out with your girlfriend or whatever that ends up looking like. You're always going to have a trade-off of something. So trying to balance in the best way possible of the things that you deem as most important, and then trying to progress all of those at the same time.
Yeah, it's the toughest task, but I think that's where, you know, true beauty and fulfillment is gained. And like, we've spoken about it before, Ilan, but I think that's like the criticism we've got at times of like the Goggins type mindset. And, you know, David Goggins himself, even though some of the stuff he promotes is awesome for so many people, but it's that real tough, deep hustle culture that you should not go to bed at night unless you've mastered 100% of that to-do list, not that 60% of that to-do list.
Yeah, it's a dangerous thing. I think with Goggins, he's good because he just shows, if you can just take a snippet of what he says, and he pretty much says like, you are stronger than what you think. And if you can just extract that from him and, you know, acknowledge all the other good stuff he does, and just park it, that's great. But I think you're right. Like, you don't want to, there's also like a paradoxical thing as well, and it's Parkinson's law. But when you've got more balance, you'll end up being more efficient as a product of that. You've got less time to procrastinate anyway.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, mate, we touched on at the start of the episode a few fashion-related questions currently, and I think it would be remiss of us to not end off that way as well.
Go
So
for it.
what I want to ask you, mate, is what are the current ins and what are definitely the outs currently of Melbourne fashion?
Of Melbourne in particular?
Yeah, I reckon Melbourne fashion. Yeah.
I want to start off with, I think fashion as well doesn't have like yes or no.
Okay.
So in terms of like, it's a creative outlet for someone so they can wear whatever they want.
Yep.
But
Yep.
from like, I guess the industry, like skinny jeans are out, I reckon. For the most part, like bright colors. I think there's a lot of like shades and monotone. For me specifically, and what I like to wear, it's really simple garments that don't have too much graphics and details and stuff like that. I think that's been the trend kind of in the last probably 6 months, 12 months. A lot of blanks and stuff, starting with like the Uniqlo Airism tee.
Yeah. It's where we all start.
Yeah,
hey?
for sure. But I think, yeah, in terms of the ins, definitely that simplified, elevated kind of look is, and then who knows where it ends up going from
Yeah.
there. I think vintage is always going to be in. Go thrift shopping, you look at the Carhartt Detroit jackets and stuff like that. They're just timeless. So
Absolutely. And I think, on that with like Melbourne fashion, obviously I asked about Melbourne fashion, and I asked that because, do you actually think Melbourne in itself, this small city that we are in,
mate.
small in the grand scheme of the world, I would say, because do you think that we actually have our own fashion sense, even compared to like, other states in Australia?
For sure. It's funny working with different brands and like how important and vital hoodies are in like Melbourne in particular compared to say like Queensland and stuff like that. One of my clients is like, yeah, hoodies like obviously popular, but it's hot there. So like, but like Melbourne winter, it's like everyone needs like a super heavyweight hood.
Yeah.
I think Melbourne fashion in particular is so small in the grand scheme of things. And I think a lot of people starting their own fashion brands, if it's really niche and whatnot, like Melbourne's great. And you obviously want to start in Melbourne and start selling products to people. And it's great, people wearing your stuff. But you should think so much bigger. A lot of the best brands in the world, I think, are from Europe and Japan and stuff like that. So you should take inspiration from these people and these brands, and look to, if you want to go worldwide, basically. If you want to be successful, you need to sell bigger than Melbourne, I think.
Absolutely.
Of that, what's on for the next few months?
Next few months, so I'm finishing my uni exams, but next Friday, which is good fun. Epic. Thank you. Who would have thought? Tick that off the box. And then going traveling. So me and my girlfriend are doing Thailand and Bali. And then I'm fortunate at the moment that all my work's online. So I've booked a kind of one-way ticket there. And we'll do an extra probably month or so there. Not too sure yet and where I'll end up. Who knows who you meet when you're overseas and stuff like that. So that's the plan. And then just be working on the fashion advising side of things and just looking to grow and promote and lock in with that as well while traveling. And then afterwards, just putting the head down, basically.
Love that. So you're going to be a bit of a digital nomad.
Maybe, yeah. At the moment, I have the luxury, and I'm pretty fortunate in the sense of having that opportunity to be able to travel and work. So it makes sense for me to do these new experiences and utilize that. But who knows, there's a few job opportunities that might take me back here that I have to be here for. So
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. That's exciting, but just we'll see where that goes.
Love that, mate. And just to end off, where can people find you if they want to keep up with what you're doing?
Social media, so chuck Caspar Tremlett in Instagram and TikTok, quick plug. Everything's in there. My links will be in there. Working on a bunch of products and stuff soon. So if you want to be the first to be notified for that, chuck your email in my website. Stay tuned.
Love that, mate. Well, thank you for joining, mate.
Appreciate you guys for having me on.
Oh, no,
good chats.
It's been a pleasure. And, we can't wait to see what you are going on to adventuring and conquering as well, because you've already done so much, mate. And we know the sky's the limit for you. So thank you for being part of the show. And we can't wait to see what you get up to.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
mate.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.